Welcome to episode 1206 of The Sleeper and the Must. I am Justin Mason, joined as always on Sundays by Jason Collette. How you doing, my friend?
Happy Sunday, man. How are you?
I'm still struggling with this cold a little bit, but I am in good enough shape to keep moving, right? Can't go on the IL right now. It's too important of a time of the season. Trying to grind out some victories. How are your teams going?
Let's see. Sweating them out every single day. I'm still holding on to first in AL Labor. And depending on the day, I'm first or second in XFL. Then I'm either first or second in TGFBI in my league. Overall, like I said, one of the best years I've had fantasy-wise. But it is having multiple teams in contention like this. It's a grind. It's a grind on me. So I was thinking, I think we made a joke about this a week or two ago. I have a fantasy football draft coming up in a couple of weeks. Have I looked at one thing? You could ask me 5 questions right now about fantasy football, and I think Jonathan Taylor's still a Colt. I can get that far. That's about as much information as I've ascertained.
I mean, technically, it's still a Colt. He's holding out for a contract right now, so I don't know if he'll be playing on the Colts very much, but yeah, I'm right there with you. I am sweating out a bunch of teams right now and hoping that I can turn them into champions. But we're gonna see. It's gonna be a really tough last few weeks in my leagues. Hopefully, everybody else is sweating out their teams. This is the time to really grind because a lot of other people are going to be taking a huge focus on fantasy football and less of a focus on fantasy baseball, so you can really move up the standings, especially in your roto leagues. We're going to talk about a pretty interesting week in FAAB, right? It's usually at this point in the year, we're not like getting that many interesting players, but there's going to be some in this week's FAAB. Not a ton of news to talk about necessarily, at least not much I've seen. The big thing was Jose Abreu goes to the IL with a back issue. He had to get 2 cortisone shots in his back, and that didn't help. Are you dropping Jose Abreu if you have him anywhere?
Man, I really try to avoid. A couple of people were trying to deal me Abreu, and I'm all about trying to buy on the dip when he was struggling, and I passed on it. Then he got, then he started doing some things, and I was like, oh, hey, look. And now back, we've talked about it many times on this podcast. Once the back starts flaring up, it's tough for that stuff to go away, and it impacts everything else. I would add this, the CJ Crone as well. He left last night's game with back tightness. He's dealing with back tightness yet again. This was the same thing that put him on the shelf in Colorado, as if anything else could go wrong with the Angels. This is the last thing they needed. I don't know whatever else they would go, but they make the acquisition to get Crone, and now he's dealing with back trouble. So we got 2 guys that aren't performing to where we wanted them to this fantasy season, that have either been dealing with back troubles or are now dealing with back troubles. And as you said earlier, we only got 7 weeks left, 7 scoring periods.
Mm-hmm.
You can't afford to wait these things out. If there are better options out there, great. But if you're in a deep league, like you and I were talking before we started recording, I'm looking to replace a player in one of my AL lineups, and pickings are extremely slim. So sometimes you may have to ride it out. The dinged up asset may be better than what's out there.
Yeah. This is the time of year where you got to make really, really tough cuts. In my main event, I was talking to you prior to hitting record. My whole team's getting injured right now. I've had pretty good luck in terms of injuries all year. But I lost, Jonah Heim, now Bo Bichette, Josh Young, Nestor Cortez, and somebody, Joe Musgrove. And this is a team that cannot afford to lose, especially pitchers. But I'm going to have to make tough cuts. So I'm probably dropping both Nestor Cortez and Joe Musgrove, because even if they make it back, it's probably maybe their last 2 weeks of the season. How much of an impact are they really going to have?
Yeah, we talked a bit about Musgrove last week with Cortez. I mean, there's a good chance he won't even pitch the rest of the season.
Yeah.
They even said that. So it's, again, you've got options if you can find a 2-start. It's easier with pitching because you can stream it. You can try to find guys and build a replacement versus, okay, hey, you lost Abreu for the next 4 weeks. How are you going to build a replacement at first base? A little tougher to do.
Yeah. Jonathan India had a setback. He was supposed to be activated earlier this week, and then all of a sudden he wasn't being activated. It sounds like his plantar fasciitis is going to be keeping him out for quite a bit of time. Are you dropping Jonathan India?
It's tough to that impacts everything. It impacts his ability to run. It impacts his ability to hit. That's just the only way that gets better is rest. And if he had a setback, that's just more time on it. That's not, oh, give him an extra day. If you have a setback, that resets the timetable on things. So again, depending on your options, I hate to sound like a broken record, but depending on your options, it is time to make a choice.
Yeah, I think it's probably okay to drop him in a lot of formats, especially because we don't even know like what his playing time is going to necessarily look like when he comes back. I mean, they've got a logjam that they were hoping to probably trade India at the deadline, but he got hurt right before it, so they couldn't move him. So he might not even be a full-time player if and when he does come back anyways, with Matt McLean and Ellie De La Cruz and Christian Carcio-Strand all needing their own playing time. So yeah, I think you could probably drop India and move on. You want to talk about the top of the Atlanta lineup that has been absolutely on fire, put up 21 runs. It looked like a football score in honor of preseason football, 21-3 yesterday. What are your thoughts on the Atlanta lineup right now?
I was like, one thing to note there, like Nicky Lopez homered yesterday. All right.
Yeah.
And so twice this week. So Miles Straw hit a home run on Friday night, and that ended a homerless streak dating back to 2021 for him. And then Saturday, Nicky Lopez homers, and he had the second longest powerless streak. And so both these guys have homered. So I'm like, I was trying to look at it today. It's Josh Rojas. Josh Rojas now has the longest active powerless streak. So watch Josh Rojas homer today for Seattle. Yeah, just continue the trend. But I bring up Atlanta,
I hope not, because I've got the pitcher going up against Josh Rojas and Kyle Bradish.
By the way, the tribute that Seattle did for King Felix last night, just amazing tribute, even to the point of providing 0 runs of support for a great pitching performance. George Kirby, 9 shutout innings. Seattle loses 1-0 in 10. Thanks for nothing, Seattle. I mean, Rays came back to win again. Could have had another game gained on Baltimore. No, you couldn't. Even on King Felix night, you had to remind the guy just how much piss-poor run support you gave him throughout the year.
That's the perfect tribute, though, for Felix Hernandez.
God bless it. But anyhow, my point about the Atlanta lineup is a couple of things. Those 4 up at the top of the lineup, Acuna Jr., Albies, Matt Olson, and Austin Riley have hit 1 to 4 every single game since June 23rd. Every single game. And there was an article Mike Petriello wrote a week or two ago. It talked about how few at-bats Atlanta has given away this year, as far as like, hey, here are the backups. Often we're recording this on Sunday. Often the backup catcher plays Sunday. Or like in today's case, and we'll talk about it why a little later, Wander Franco's not in the lineup today. But these guys have played every single game. And in Acuna Jr. case, he hasn't missed one all season. Atlanta has an 11-game lead in their division. 11-game lead. Now, if this was the old rules where September roster expansion was 40-man roster, I'd be greatly concerned about them resting a lot of guys. But now that you can only have 28, so we're basically talking about 2 extra guys coming up. That said, you have to figure at some point Atlanta's going to start giving these guys some time off, but they have been riding them. And I know they put up 21 runs and 28 if you combine the second game of the doubleheader yesterday in this. But they're kind of in a rough patch. I mean, they couldn't have asked for the Mets at a better time because they've been playing right about 500 baseball over the last 25, 30 games. And maybe it's because these guys are like, hey, I'm tired. They've been playing a lot. So I only wanted to bring up this Atlanta lineup to look at it as you start planning ahead for September, that these guys that have been out there every single day may start taking a seat every now and then. Unless, like, I know Acuna Jr., he's on pace. I actually wrote him up this weekend for RotoWire. He's on pace to try to set the modern day run scoring record, which is 152 by Jeff Bagwell. And the pace that Acuna's on, he's at 148. So, there's a chance that he could get there with that. And he's obviously having an incredible season. It's crazy to see what Acuna Jr. and Freddie Freeman and Matt Olson and Ohtani are all doing at the same time with it. So I just wanted to bring that up, the fact that they're playing so much. Eventually I could see Brian Snitker saying, okay, hey, day off, and maybe not multiple guys on the top, but that situation bears watching down the stretch because Atlanta really has nothing to play for outside of, hey, we want to protect our home field advantage all the way through the NL, and they currently have a 5-game lead on that.
Yeah, definitely watch your schedules kind of down the stretch because you're going to see a fair amount of days off here over the next couple weeks. And so I think like 6 teams are only playing 5 games next week, and there are a number of 6-man rotations. And so you're going to see a lot less 2-steps. I was talking about it in the pull hitter Discord because other people were kind of mentioning, slim pickings for 2 starts this week. And I mentioned, I was doing in my article for Fantasy Pros, and that on top of 6-man rotation, 6 teams having 5-game weeks, there's also, a full week of course and a full week of Great American Ballpark, which, eliminates 4 potential guys on 2-steps this week. So it's pretty slim pickings. Really pay attention closely to the schedule. I love the scheduled grid and the probables grid over on Fangraphs. I have them up all the time, especially when I'm setting lineups and doing FAAB like I will be later today.
You're looking at Mariners, Royals, Mets, Cardinals, Padres, and Diamondbacks with 7 games this week. Mm-hmm. And then the Jays, Twins, White Sox, Phillies, Cubs, and Reds with 5.
Yeah. So definitely take advantage of the schedule and don't leave yourself with too few games in the process. Let's talk about some FAAB. Like I said, there are some impactful guys this week. It's not quite as boring as the week as we've had in the past. Let's start with kind of the number one pitcher that people are going to be going after, and that's Emerson Hancock. 0% rostered in NFBC leagues, and I'm sure pretty low rostered everywhere else as well. He had a pretty decent first start. He lines up for a 2-step this week, again at Kansas City and then at Houston. So a really, really good one, and then a not so good one. Are you going to be aggressive on Emerson Hancock?
Participating, yes. Aggressive, no. The Houston start at Houston really scares the crap out of me.
Yeah.
Now that lineup is fully operational, that's a scary one for him. I know I said the kind of same thing with Cole Reagans last week, and he went out and just shoved it in Fenway. So things could happen. That said, Reagans has better control and command of stuff than Hancock. The Hancock's got nasty stuff. But even in the debut we saw last night, walks and strikeouts, same total. You look through the minor leagues, issues with a little bit with walks. So no on the Houston. If you have the flexibility, I don't know if people have flexibility in lineups where they could start and stop. But yes, start KC, sit Houston. But otherwise, I will participate, but I will not be aggressive in it.
Yeah, I'm going to be participating as well. I'm probably not going to be as aggressive. Mostly because I don't have a ton of FAAB, and so I can't really afford to be as aggressive as maybe I would like to be. But with the amount of pitching losses I've had, especially like in my main event, like I've got to try to pick somebody up. Though one of the things I decided I think I'm going to do this week, as opposed to like streaming bad starters, is just look for bulk relievers. I think you're going to see a lot of teams are doing like what the Giants are doing right now, which is like, hey, we're going to bring in a starter for, a quote unquote starter for 2 or 3 innings. And then we'll bring in Sean Manaea, or we'll bring in, other guys to kind of follow. And I think those guys are going to be the ones that are probably more valuable than some of the crappy starters that are still available on the waiver wire. I think in 15-team leagues, you're obviously going after Emerson Hancock. In 10s and 12s, I think you should be a little bit more cautious because of that Houston start at the end of the week. Though the Kansas City start is really, really tantalizing.
Indeed.
Next guy on the docket is Javier Assad, who pitched really, really well in his last start. It looks like he's going to be the 5th man in the Cubs rotation, kind of moving forward for at least a little bit. He gets a start Wednesday versus the Chicago White Sox at home. How interested are you in Javier Assad?
You said the magic word, White Sox. Yep.
Yep.
That's where I want to go. And the Cubs are playing well. So that's really what it comes down to. Cubs playing well. He's got a strong matchup. And, as we were talking about earlier, if you need to build replacement, this is the type of option you look at if you're trying to replace, like you mentioned in your main event, Nestor Cortez. You've got to look at trying to find an option. This is a way you can build a piece of the Voltron that you need to replace somebody.
Yeah, I mean, Assad looks really good. I do question like how deep he's going to go in every game, though he went fairly deep in this in this last start. 15 team leagues, I think you got to take a shot at him because there's just so little available, and you should really be trying to take advantage of matchups right now. Matchups were the number one thing I look for in terms of streaming to begin with, but especially at this time of year, there's just such a discrepancy between the good teams and the bad teams after the trade deadline that, if you can take advantage of a team like the White Sox, a team like the Mets, a team like the A's, you got to do that, even if it's with a lesser.
Assad's latest matchup, the Jays too. I mean, that's not, this is the Jays. We've talked about it. Only Oakland is worse at scoring runs.
Yeah.
Toronto gets plenty of people on base. They just don't drive them in. They are the second worst team in baseball in plating their base runners, and their volume, I believe they are top 5 in overall base runners. So it may be like a whip thing, but your ERA should be pretty good in the matchups because they just do not drive in runners. It's been something that's been happening all year long to them, all year long.
Yeah. Nice thing though for Toronto is they have a really, really easy stretch towards the end of their season. So starting on Friday, August 25th, they've got a series against Cleveland, followed by a series against the Nationals, followed by a series at Colorado, followed by a series at Oakland, followed by a series versus Kansas City.
So that certainly helps their case, but it's just like they have been underperforming, treading water all year long.
Yeah, but then they also get 2 series versus the Yankees out of their last 4 series. So, as much as I think Toronto's really, really underperformed, I think they're going to backdoor their way into the playoffs. They just got, and shout out to Chris Crawford. I think he is at RotoWire now. Because he's the one who pointed this out. What were the MLB schedule makers thinking when they put together this end of the season schedule for Toronto?
Because he's looking at his Mariners saying, "Okay,
exactly.
We're 9-1 in our last 10. look at Toronto."
Yeah,
exactly. I stare at their record, and I'm like, "Wow, they're 65-54." It's like, how are they doing that? Because all I see is their fan base bitching and moaning, and then I look at the numbers, and I'm like, "Wow, that is terrible. How are they doing this?" And I'll pose this question to you. How many Blue Jays do you think have 20 home runs this year?
Okay. I'm going to say that only one has 20 home runs.
Zero.
Oh, wow.
Vlad leads that team with 18 home runs. Next,
I was thinking
Jet with 17.
I was thinking that Vlad was the only one with 20, but
no, it is.
Well,
now the only guy who doesn't have double-digit home runs in their starting lineup is Kevin Kiermaier. Shocker. But everybody else has at least 10, including your favorite guy, Brandon Belt, who has been hitting well of late. So it's been balanced in that regard, but they don't have that one anchor, that one guy that's doing all of this stuff for them. And so, they have 0 players with 20 home runs.
Remember, early on in the season when people were anointing Matt Chapman as the MVP? He's, and because let's see, I want to say through May, through April, he was hitting 384 with 5 home runs. Yeah. Everybody's really excited. Matt Chapman was back. He is hitting, I believe, 228 for the season.
255 with 15 homers.
255 for him is actually pretty good. So, all right, let's keep it rolling and talk about the next guy, who's Freddy Tarnok. And you may be asking, who the hell is Freddy Tarnok? Well, he is a pitching prospect that has spent most of the year on the IL for the Oakland A's, and is now in the rotation and pitching pretty well. However, as Paul and I talked about on Friday with JP Sears, you cannot buy a win as an Oakland pitcher. So you have any interest in Freddy Tarnok?
No. In a keeper league, maybe if I can get somebody on the cheap now and try to stash and do something like that. But regular reset leagues, no. Like I said, you cannot buy the win, and so everything else is at risk when you take on a guy like Tarnok. I mean, he came out of the Atlanta organization, was part of the Olsen deal, and it has worked obviously a lot better for Atlanta in this case. But no, I can't buy a win from there, and I don't want to take the risk of what could come from it if he gets out there and has a bad outing. Who'd you say the matchup was?
He's at St. Louis.
I mean,
it's a pretty decent matchup, but he also is the kind of guy where like he has to have a starter going in front of him, so they've got to do some sort of opener because he's not going deep enough into games right now to qualify if he's starting. So I think he's one of those guys in Daily Moose formats that if you see that he's going to be the bulk guy on Wednesday when they face St. Louis, then okay, maybe you take a shot because he did he's pitching on Tuesday. He has pitched fairly well as of late, but unless he's going to get that opener for him, I don't think he's going to go deep enough into a game. And he's coming off of pretty serious shoulder injury where I think the A's are obviously going to be pretty careful with him in terms of how deep they'll let him go into the game. So I doubt I even put a bid on him in my waterfall in a 15-team league like my main event. So. But I thought I'd bring him up because he did have a really nice outing against Texas where he struck out 4 in 4 innings, only allowing 2 hits and 2 walks. So,
not a matchup you thought he would have excelled in.
Yeah, let's talk some hitters. There's a lot of impactful hitters. Brian Hayes is hot, and he's been dropped in a number of leagues. I picked him up for Josh Young in a league last week. He had a really nice week to kind of reward me for that. Are we buying back in on Brian Hayes?
Cabrizi. Got to say that for Paul. Got to buy back in for Cabrizi. Yeah, I mean, he's been hot. You may have missed some of the juice out of it, but he's been hot. He's playing, and you got to kind of ride that out with that. So, yeah, if I had the opportunity to pick him up, I was looking at his numbers. Hitting 281 here in the second half. Only has 3 home runs, but has driven in 11. Pirates offense is limiting the rest of it because he only has 4 runs scored in that time, but he's making the most of his opportunities at the plate.
Yeah, all 3 of his home runs are in the last 4 games. I mean, he's just on fire right now. I think you got to roll with that. That doesn't even account for the fact that he's got a fair amount of speed in the profile as well. He's going to hit pretty high. He's hit leadoff in 2 of his last 3 games. Hit third in that other game. So, if Hayes is still available on your wire because people kind of gave up hope with the injuries and kind of the struggles, I think now is the time to go buy in on Brian Hayes because he is one of those guys that can be a game changer down the stretch. Alfonso Rivas is playing well right now. Any interest in Rivas in Pittsburgh?
Every week you put a name on this chart, I'm like, honestly, who? And part of the problem for me is I don't do that. I don't have National League only. So it's like somebody like this is not going to be on my radar for this. And that's really where that's my fault. But this playing time was created for him by the trade of G-Man Choi. Why did I say Heesop Choi? Holy cow. G-Man Choi. That's where the playing time got created for him. So, he's bounced around a few times, but again, he has the playing time. He's playing right now. And if you're trying to spinning it back to the earlier part of the podcast, if you're trying to replace Jose Abreu, you're looking at dealing with CJ Cron's back. This is one of those options that you could use to build your new first baseman, or ride this one out until it dies and go on to the next guy. Yeah.
Rivas is one of those guys who, he doesn't really do anything particularly well. He's got a little bit of pop, decent enough hit tool where I think he get 250 something. But he's pretty boring for the most part. And, he's sitting in one of the worst parks in baseball for power. That being said, he's going to play every day. And in most leagues, because of his eligibility last year, he's outfield eligible and first base eligible. So, if you've listened to the show for any length of time, you know how much I like those guys who can play, who can be eligible in infield and outfield,
Right.
being able to kind of switch back and forth. So for me, like I know he's a guy who's going to be on my bid list this week in places where I need a first baseman, because first base is not as deep as it's been
It's
in
not
years
this year.
past. Ildemaro Vargas is playing a fair amount right now in Washington. Had a nice little hustle play to make Luis Medina look pretty stupid the other night. So, any interest in Ildemaro Vargas?
No, I mean, there's no, even with regular playing time, his one redeeming skill is high contact. So like if you can afford an empty batting average and maybe he gets on a heater, otherwise, no, there's nothing there.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I mean, it's pretty empty batting average. And while he's playing, a decent amount right now, like I don't know that his time is concrete, even in Washington. Like it's just such a boring profile. What about Brayan Rocchio, who is a top prospect for the Cleveland Guardians? He was called up after their trade of Ahmed Rosario. He's playing pretty regularly in Cleveland at shortstop. Any interest in Rocchio?
Yeah, I've watched him play the last 2 days with it, and I've been impressed with his plate appearances. Kind of honestly reminds me of Josh H. Smith with Texas, how when he first came up in his appearances at the plate. But Rocchio's got a nice approach at the plate, very athletic, moves well on the bases, and has been good defensively. Now, the lineup's been a little weird this week with Ramirez serving his suspension for starting his boxing career. So, yeah, but I would expect Rocchio to continue within the lineup. But he's been impressive at the plate, and he doesn't have much power, but has gap power, has some speed, kind of like every other Cleveland hitter not named Jose Ramirez. So that's what they do. And so yeah, I'd be interested in him. Of all the names we've mentioned so far, I mean, offensively, we haven't mentioned much. Hayes would be at the top, but Rocchio would be right behind him for me so far.
Yeah, I like Rocchio, especially because if you kind of look at his game logs, in 2 of the last 3 games, he's hit first and second. And so, and now that may be a product of the fact that Jose Ramirez was out because of that boxing career. Dave McDonald actually told me that apparently Jose Ramirez in the offseason in spring training, like after practice or after, he'll go over to the local boxing gym and train. So he was not the guy Tim Anderson wanted to start a fight with. But yeah, I like Rocky. Like he doesn't have any sort of fantasy carrying tool. Like he doesn't have a ton of speed. He doesn't have a ton of power, but he's got a little bit of both with a really good contact tool. So I think he's one of those guys, especially if he can be hitting, anywhere decently towards the top of that Guardians lineup, like he could score a bunch of runs and just chip in with home runs and stolen bases. So if you are hurting for middle infield, which I know a lot of people are, this is kind of my backup option. We're going to talk about my first option this week here in a minute when we talk about Trevor Story. But let's first talk about Royce Lewis, who has returned from the IL. Another guy who's eligible in the middle infield, but also eligible at third base in a lot of leagues. A top prospect with a lot of tools kind of in that profile, but the only tool he hasn't been able to actually use is health. Dude just gets hurt nonstop. But if he can stay healthy for the stretch run, could be really impactful. What are your thoughts on Royce Lewis?
So where's he gonna go? That's one of the things. So as I'm looking at, like even today, Edouard Julien is playing against a lefty, which has been rare for him. So he is hitting against a lefty, albeit he's hitting ninth. Where do they put Royce Lewis in the lineup? Maybe it is Julian's spot, but he's been hitting leadoff when he hasn't faced lefties, and he's been doing well. And so that's my only concern is where do they find the room for him? Do they finally just say, Joey Gallo, bye, it's been fun? I don't know what else. They've got the platoon situation going on, even as well as Matt Wallner has been hitting for them. They've been using Jordan Luplow against certain matchups. Now Wallner is playing today. He is hitting sixth against the lefty as well. And Luplow is hitting third. So both of those guys are in the lineup instead of bouncing things back and forth. My only concern is they've been, Rocco's been using multiple platoons in this place, and maybe it's Gallo's swan song, because even when he has been playing, he's been hitting 8th or 9th, and we know that's it's been all or nothing, as just as we expected. So perhaps it's Gallo's swan song, even with the 20 home runs he's hit. But how much longer can they absorb a 305 OBP and a 185 batting average?
My guess is that once Lewis is activated, and it doesn't look like he's been quite activated yet, but he's expected to earlier on in the week, is that he'll play mostly third, and Willie Castro goes back to being kind of like a super utility guy. But you could be right. It could be Gallo. I mean, Gallo's been absolutely atrocious, and they're not even using his defense in the outfield because they've got such good defenders other places. They might just decide to designate Gallo for assignment, because I mean at this point, why are you? I was actually looking at Gallo as a potential pickup just because I needed power in a league, and I just did a kind of a week by week log of what his stats. He hasn't hit 200 in 2 months in any given week. It's been absolutely atrocious.
It's tough to I'm trying to figure out a way, and I'm sure Twins fans listening to this be like, hey dummies, there's an easy way to do this. But I'm trying to figure out a way, okay, if they jettison Joey Gallo, who else could play first base? Not Matt Walter. Matt Walter's
Willie Castro.
Willie Castro, that's the only position he hasn't played this season.
Oh.
I was just looking at Willie Castro. He's played left field, third base, center field, second, short, right, and DH. He has not played first base. So it's Gallo made – Jordan Luplow, I know, has played at least one game at first base in his career, but that may be Joey Gallo's redeeming quality, is that nobody else can play the position.
Yeah. I mean, Ryan Jeffers, maybe. Donovan Solano. He's played first base.
Okay.
I mean I think that would be the answer, is Donovan Solano. But I just can't understand why a team like the Twins didn't make a move for even a G-Man Choi. If you didn't want to make a move for CJ Cron like the Angels did, but just a guy who can play the position.
Your AL Central champs, folks.
They just said, "Hey, nobody's going to catch us anyway, so why do we make
your AL Central champs? This is it."
That's ridiculous. All right, let's talk about Trevor Story, who just got on base via, I don't know if they're going to call this an error or a hit, but he is back. He's hitting fairly decently. I think he's already got a home run under his belt.
Negative.
Maybe a stolen base. He has
stolen base
under his belt. All right. Any interest? Well, obviously you're going to have some interest in Trevor Story, but how interested are you going to be?
Since he's been back, he's hit third or fifth in the lineup. The problem is just the long layoff with that we saw with Adam Duvall when he came back from his injury, and how that's impacted him and his playing time. He was on fire, got hurt, came back, was slow. So far, Story does have the stolen base and a run scored, and 30 at bats, hitting 200.
He literally just stole another base.
That's my interest in him right now. Is we know he can run, we know he can move, and we know Boston will let him do it. And so that's my interest in him. And if he can get it, if he's going to hit there in the lineup, and he's going to be doing that in front of Tristan Cass. I know Tristan Cass is sitting down the lineup, but he's been on fire of late, and we know Boston can put up some runs. Although recently I saw a stat that they've been struggling to put up some runs, or they've been 3.5 runs over the past 2 weeks or something like that. But I'm interested in Story for his steals. Everything else is gravy to me.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I don't know what the power is going to look like. Currently, literally as we speak, they're just flashing up something that says he's 5 for 9 with 2 doubles and 2 stolen bases so far since returning. And he tried to steal third and got gunned. Literally watching this right now. But he's on the move. Yeah, that's a really good sign that he's willing to kind of be aggressive on the base paths. That was a really stupid time to steal.
How many outs?
Base. I think there was 1 out. But they're just showing the replay because I think they may challenge this. It was a really bang bang kind of play. But Yeah, just you're up 1 run. Oh no, that was a third out. So
he's trying to steal third with 2 outs. Oh, jeez.
Yeah, and when you have you've got Yoshida up to bat, a guy who can make a lot of contact, and you're probably going to score on any single, into the outfield. So I think he's safe. Ooh, they should challenge that. I think they are challenging it. Okay. I think Story should be. I mean, he's got to be the number one hitting target this week for people. And I do think hey, he's a guy who could steal a bunch of bases down the stretch. And if he gets hot, we know what Trevor Story can be. The question is, coming off the injury, how much power is he actually going to have in that bat? Speaking of questioning how much power he's still got in the bat, Charlie Blackmon's going to be back soon. They've got a full week of Coors this week. So if he does come back this week, he could be a nice little pickup. Are you targeting Charlie Blackmon at all?
So I was looking at the news. He just began his rehab assignment. And that's the unfortunate part. He just began his rehab assignment. When I look at the news report said Charlie Blackmon started his rehab assignment on Saturday. So he yesterday playing today. Yeah, I would be shocked. So he's going to miss some of the sweetness because they're at home, as you mentioned earlier. They have 7 games in Colorado this week, 6 against right-handers. This would have been the perfect week to bring this guy back from the dead and say, hey, let's try to do something here. But he may miss half that. So I'm not as interested with that uncertainty because he may end up missing more than half of that because the lefty may pitch in one of the games he's back. So no, I'm not interested in Blackmon.
And here's the thing. So the Rockies actually have a really good schedule rest of the way in terms of being able to pick and choose when you use their players in Coolers because they're in Coors all this week. They're on the road all next week. The following week after that, they're home versus Atlanta and Toronto. Then they're on the road for the entire week. Then they're at home for the entire week. Then they're on the road for the entire week. And then they finish at home for the entire week. So you've got the ability to kind of optimize even in weekly leagues really, really well for Rockies players. So he's a guy that I'm actually okay with picking up and stashing in a weekly league if he's not going to be obviously activated on Monday. But you're not going to be able to use him for, probably 2 weeks. So and you're only going to be able to use him every other week rest of the season. So if that's the kind of player that you can stash, I understand it, but I know a lot of people aren't in a position to be like, oh, I'm only going to use this guy 50% of the time, and it's going to be 2 weeks before I use him.
Yeah.
Next guy on the docket is Alec Burleson. Burleson has been playing quite a bit and playing very, very well for the Cardinals. They're dealing with some injuries. Dylan Carlson put back onto the IL. Tyler O'Neill's been banged up. Any interest in Alec Burleson?
I saw Burleson play earlier this week. Kind of reminded me of kind of the G-Man Choi kind of profile. Burly lefty that can face righties, has got a good plate approach. They did recently call up Lucan Baker, who I saw play here in Charlotte 2 weeks ago on a Sunday, and is a giant, big, slow right-handed bat. So maybe the two of those guys are going to toggle back and forth in a DH capacity type of situation. I don't know. I mean, Burleson played first base and right field and left field. So he had actually every day he was in the lineup at 4 different spots. He's not playing today, but he was at first base, right field, left field, DH. So they have moved him around. Baker is first base or DH. And since Goldschmidt's there, Baker's DH. There's no way that guy's playing. No way that guy's playing in the field situation. Tyler O'Neill is back in spirit as he's played each of the last 3 games there. So yeah, in a deeper league, especially in a mono league, Burleson has some intrigue if they're going to continue to play him on a mostly day basis.
Just an update, they did overturn that caught stealing. So Story now has 3 stolen bases and he scored on the next batter. So I like Burleson. I think he's going to play a fair amount moving forward. They really like his bat. So I think he's a guy that I would try to ride the hot streak a little bit with, a little bit of pop in that profile. Should be hitting in a decent spot in that lineup, behind some pretty good bats.
Well, their bench sucks. I mean, he should be in there. Like I said, unless Baker's going to come in and be the DH against lefties, it's the backup catcher, Jose Fermin and Taylor Motter. It's like Burleson could play just about every day if he wants to. in that situation.
I think he will. I mean, he might be strong side platoon. I think Baker's probably just depth at this point, which makes you wonder, like, where the hell is Juan Yepez? Like, is he hurt?
He was in the same game that I saw Baker play. Juan Yepez was there too.
Yeah, I'm just surprised that Yepez is not been brought back up, especially
I'm going back tonight to go see them play. See Charlotte play the Gwinnett Stripers.
All right. Let's finish out with, I'm gonna butcher this name, unless you know it off the top of your head. Oslelvis
Basabe.
I knew the Basabe, but Oslelvis is that's a pretty rough name for me to be trying to pronounce it. 9-10 o'clock in the morning. He is a infield prospect for the Rays. He got brought up yesterday. Any interest in Basabe?
So I mentioned this earlier about with Franco. Franco's been playing pretty much every single day. He's not in today's lineup because Basabe is, and that's one of the things that they've lacked is, Franco's leading the league in outs above average from shortstops. Played an unbelievable shortstop this year, but it is, on turf for the most part, and that wears on you. And so they've wanted to find a way to get him some time off, but they haven't had the ability to do so. Taylor Walls has been hurt, and that's part of the reason why Franco has had to play every day, because Walls was that natural guy over there. They've tried Fidel Brujan. Brujan just struggles defensively and is better on the other side of the bag anyhow, and really struggles offensively too. Basabe has been in AAA Durham, and that's why I'm wearing the hat today, all season. Similar profile to Brujan, high contact, good speed, really good defense, can play all over the diamond, and that's why they've called him up. I believe he's up to stay because of that flexibility. And the other piece of that equation is the Rays have a lot of lefties this week as they're playing your Giants this week. And Alex Wood, and then there's Alex Wood on the plate. There's Reed Detmers, and then there's also Tyler Anderson. So they got lefties. And so Curtis Mead's going to stay up, even though Curtis Mead is 0-4 since his first hit. He got a hit in his first major league plate appearance and is 0-4, and honestly has not looked good in those plate appearances. But he's going to stay up. So he and Basabe are both going to be in the lineup a few times this week. So I mentioned Basabe for minor league or mono league players. I don't believe he's mixed league viable yet, but he is going to get some playing time this week with the lefties out there and some of his defensive flexibility, because they've been playing Isaac Paredes to second base lately because they're just limited in what they could do with it. And he's manned it. He hasn't screwed it up, but yeah, it's one of these things where Basabe's defensive abilities will come into play this week, and I expect him to play at least 3 times.
Yeah, I think in mono leagues makes a lot of sense. I mean, at this point, in a lot of mono leagues, you're just looking for a guy with a pulse. I mean, you pretty much take whatever you can get, and he should play, some this week with so many lefties on the docket. Mixed league's not a guy you got to worry about. So
he's one of their better prospects, baseball prospects. I wouldn't say fantasy prospects because again, power ceiling is rather limited with a guy who's 22 years old. The power's not there, but this is all about the speed and defense and his bat to ball skills with that.
Yeah. All right. That's going to wrap us up for this week. What are you working on? Where can people reach you at?
So I just finished a story on Acuna Jr.'s amazing season. I tweeted about this yesterday, but when you look at the fact that he has 25 plus homers and 50 plus steals, how rare that is to do in a single season. And right now he's the only one, but Corbin Carroll and Bobby Witt Jr. could also do it in this same season. But then you add the extra layer of amazingness on top of Acuna Jr. He could have 75 plus RBIs and 100 plus runs scored. And that's like the 25, 50, 75, 100 type of thing. When I went back in history and looked at that, we're talking Eric Davis, Barry Bonds, Ricky Henderson once, and then Joe Morgan twice. That's it. Joe Morgan's the only guy to ever do it twice. And here we may have 3 guys in one season. But then Acuna Jr. is going to do that. And so, what do we look at next year? Because he is arguably going to be he should be 1-1 just about every league format next year. If you are one of the people that free agent sign contract kind of thing. So I don't want to take Ohtani 1-1. So let's say Acuna is going to go 1-1 in 8 of 10 leagues. And maybe Ohtani's the other 2, or maybe Ohtani's 1 and somebody takes Bobby Witt 1-1. These things could happen with that. But I went back and looked the last couple of seasons and what happened with the top dollar earner. So taking a look at the season after for Christian Yelich, and I think we all know what's happened with him since his amazing year, and then Jose Abreu, and then Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and then Aaron Judge. Like every year, the guy who's finished on top the next season has not. And even of all those guys, Vlad was the best of the four, but each one of them has had something else go wrong. So it's like Acuna is doing amazing, and I don't know if people, and maybe it's because I live in a bubble. I don't know if enough people are talking about just how special his season is right now, given that there's only been 9 players in the history of the sport that have had 25 home runs and 50 stolen bases in the same season. And I tell you, I completely forgot about this one. One of those is Ryan Sandberg. I completely forgot about that one in 1985. When I looked at it, I was like, whoa, completely forgot about that. But we've only had 9 players in history have done that. And Acuna's been awesome. But it's like there's so much tension on Matt Olson chasing 60 home runs and Ohtani chasing 60 home runs. And it's like, man, look what this guy's doing up here. And yeah, it certainly helps that he's got Albies and he's got Olson. He's got Riley behind him, ensuring that he's doing all this stuff with runs, because that's part of the equation. That's what it takes. Because one of the guys that I mentioned on that 25, I didn't mention, that 25-50 is Cesar Cedeno. Did it in 72 and 73 in the Astrodome. I mean, hitting 25 home runs in the Astrodome is like hitting 50 somewhere today. It's tough to do. He did that back then, but there was no other offense on that club, so he didn't score the runs. And so when I did some of the other requirements, he fell off because he couldn't get to 100 runs scored, because that was impossible to do in the Astrodome in the early 70s.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a pretty amazing season. I think that he is going to be one of the main candidates for 1-1. I also think it's going to be a really, really good year to kind of have a mid or back end pick. In 2024. There's just so much talent at the top and a pretty big drop off, I think, probably around like pick 20, something like that. So I think you got that middle or back end kind of pick. You're going to have a really, really nice kind of start, 2 guys to start your roster. In my first draft right now, because it's a 3 sport draft, and Acuna went pretty high. I think he was the second.
Hey, I just saw a news bit, Robert. Yeah. Not that I don't know if anybody's still using Ohtani as pitching at this point, but he is not going to pitch his start this week. He's skipping his start versus Texas. He told Phil Nevin he was feeling some arm fatigue, no injury, so his next start will be versus Cincinnati in South LA. But he is not going to pitch this week.
There you go. So that's good to know. For those of you who've got Ohtani as a pitcher and a hitter, you're going to want to use him as a hitter this week. And those of you who've got Ohtani as a pitcher only, like in Yahoo, you're going to want to put him on.
Or if you're in Tout, where both players exist, now you got to do something else this week with Ohtani because you don't have him.
Yep. You can reach me on Twitter at Justin Mason FWFB. You can reach me on all my social media platforms there. I've got a bunch of them now. So you can also read all my work over on Fangraphs and on Fantasy Pros. I didn't write very much this last week because I've been sick, but I will be right back to the grindstone pretty much as of today. I'm going to be writing all day today and all day tomorrow. So that will wrap us up for this episode. For Jason and myself, thank you for listening. Have a fantastic baseball season.